I made a mistake months ago. I asked a lady that used to come here to Mosaic, I said, hey, did you vote it? And she looked at me and she said, I can't vote. I don't have my papers.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Churches podcast. We are here to give you practical wisdom and insight into leading your church and radically aligning your teams and your people back to the Great Commission. And so if this concept of bringing radical alignment to your church is interesting to you, the best place to get started is with our free Radical Alignment ebook. It's just a super simple 15-minute read, and it unpacks what it means to be on the intentional church journey. So it's full of practical steps and includes an assessment to gauge if your leadership team and church are radically aligned. So make sure you download it for free at intentionalchurches.com/alignment. Well, we've got another great conversation in store today. And as usual, I'm joined by my good friend, Doug Parks. What is up, Doug?
How's it going, Erin? It's March in Vegas, and we might touch 90 degrees today or tomorrow.
Oh, my goodness. Yep, that sounds about right. And we have a new friend with us today. Very excited about this. Our new friend, Eduardo. Eduardo, I'm going to actually toss it to you and let you introduce yourself a little bit. Who are you, Eduardo? Tell us, what do we need to know about Eduardo?
Well, guys, it's good to be with Doug and you, Erin. So I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I moved here in 2001 for family matter and situations, happening. And I don't know, a week into being here, I found a job. So I stayed here, never went back. And started serving at a church, a Hispanic church here in Orlando, where I met my wife, and we got married in 2007. I started going to seminary back in 2002, 2003, and then finished the master's recently. So I've been in Orlando serving in different churches, Hispanic churches. I serve as a pastor of a church in Davenport for 3 years. So I think God has been doing something in my life since I arrived here in 2001.
That's cool. So tell us a little bit about where you are serving now, and maybe just give us a little bit of context for where you are, the church you're a part of, all that.
Well, I'm currently the pastor of Mosaic Español and Portugués here in Mosaic Church in Winter Garden. It's been a great experience to be part of this church. I started in what is called OCPN, Orlando Church Planting Network. So initially I was going to plant a Hispanic church, which it was called, I'm excited because I always tell the name of it. It was going to be called El Pueblo, which is the translation for the people, like God's people. So El Pueblo. So when I finished the residency with OCPN, we started talking about what would it look like to be the pastor for Espanol here in Mosaic. So conversations, and God opened the doors, and Mosaic has been welcome Hispanics and different ethnicities here in Mosaic. So now I'm currently serving in that space, and it's been a great journey so far.
Eduardo, share with our listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with the Orlando or Central Florida area, how has Orlando changed in the last 20 years in terms of demographic?
Yes. Hey, the population, when you start looking at percentages of Hispanics, I don't think the numbers really capture the reality of the Hispanics. Like if you separate the cities. For example, if you talk about Kissimmee, Kissimmee, it's just 90% Hispanics. I might be exaggerating, but it's a high percentage. I joke about, because when I go to that area, it's hard to find somebody to speak English. Like you go into a convenience store and it's like, who speak English here? And nobody. But then if you go to Orlando, it's 35%, 35.6. But then you move to Winter Garden, Ocoee. So I will say that if you take all that in consideration, we're talking about a high 40% Hispanic population in Orlando, which is, if you look at it, is almost half. So the population in Orlando have changed drastically in the last 10 or 15 years. And one of the things that I was talking to a friend of mine the other day is that the the Hispanic population that came in 25 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, like me in '01, we had the chance to plan. We sold, you know, our houses, our cars. We applied for a job. I mean, that wasn't my case, but a lot of people in the '90s, early 2000s, there was a plan to get here. What have changed is that in the last 10 or 15 years, you have people fleeing from their countries. There was no time to sell your house. There was no time to let me apply for this job. So we are encountering a community not as prepared, not professionally. I'm not talking about professionals here. I'm talking about the time they had to plan. Like, if you have a pregnant woman, you have 9 months to buy the room and to prepare the room and all the stuff. When you adopt, which is my case, I adopt. My two kids are adopted. They call us on a Tuesday. We needed to pick up the kid on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So, I got no crib. I have no baby, car seat. I don't have anything. So when you take that in consideration, we're talking about a much different community. And then how do we, the church, come alongside with them and say, okay, so you don't have this. Let me see how can we serve you. I think that's a challenge in recent years.
Wow, that's crazy. Thanks for sharing that, Eduardo. I'm curious, so you're in a deeply Hispanic community, right? What you just began to allude to kind of the nuance of ministering to this community of people in particular. What would you say you've learned over the last 25 years about ministering to this community as things have shifted, as the realities of this community have shifted? What would you share with our listeners about the realities of ministering to the Latino community?
I think that we have to do a better job of learning their culture. And that's even for myself. Like, I'm a Hispanic, but I'm from Puerto Rico, which is I'm a U.S. citizen. And sometimes I'm even myself, I am disconnected from the reality of some other Central, America countries. Like, I made a mistake months ago, and probably a year ago, and I after I asked the question, I was like, "What am I asking?" I asked a lady that used to come here to Mosaic. I said, "Hey, did you vote it?" Like, in my head, I'm like, "Are you voting?" Like, it's a normal question because I'm a U.S. citizen. I can go and vote. And she looked at me and she said, "I can't vote. I don't have my papers." So it's learning the realities of this Hispanic community. What are the nuances? What is the difference? And the expectation that we understand because we have an idea. I don't think that's the right approach. Rather, I think that we need to engage in a deeper conversation, actually sitting down with these people and saying, "Tell me your reality. Why is it that you cannot maybe give the same way the Anglo gives? What is it that you cannot do, this type of things that we are used to at church, maybe attending a church?" We need to understand their culture, their background, in a way that we can create a ministry or programs or structure, right? Whatever is it that we need to build to fit them, to make them fit. So I think that's perhaps the greatest challenge is just learning.
Yeah, and it's different it's not like if you're from different countries, it's different, right? It's not
different.
all things are not equal.
Yes.
Um, Eduardo, I'm very interested. You know, we met in January,
Hmm.
and I sat with several of you guys who were Spanish speaking pastors, and you just were enlightening me, and I just felt like our listeners really needed to hear kind of how you were thinking. So I think I want to frame up this question like, you know, you talked about you almost planted a church, but ended up leading the ministry inside of Mosaic, which is more it's more of a traditional suburban church, right? It's got diversity in it, but it's a traditional, more suburban church. And tell us your journey to that decision of from maybe going to plant to deciding to lead these ministries inside of Mosaic. How did you get there?
Sure. Well, so when you're planting a church, like any other venture that you're going to do, and that doesn't have to do with maybe Hispanics or Anglos, but when you plant a church, there's a lot of challenges. You need resources, you need partners with you, you need to create a core group, you need to do all that stuff. Which when I came to Mosaic as a pastor, I have to do the same thing. But now maybe the resources, I'm not in need of that many resources because maybe I have a room that I can serve. Maybe I have classrooms where I can do Bible studies. So I think that when you create a ministry, you need to understand what is it that you have to build this ministry. So I want to serve the Hispanic community. So in my situation, like even if I was gonna plant, I said, so I think God is opening this door that I can serve the community within Mosaic. So I jump into that opportunity, and the challenges are the same. I need to build a core. I need to, you know, create this community. But I think the challenge now is the people that are coming from outside Hispanic, how do they see the Anglo community? Because now you're coming into a space that you're going to encounter with a different culture. You're going to encounter things that you don't understand. So my job as a pastor is to navigate both cultures and be able to sort of be in a bridge and say, okay, so here's the challenges that we now have. And I think that talks about the integration. Like, how do we integrate these people into a culture that they don't understand? And how do I also the Anglo community to understand us? And I think that's the challenge. I think that's the tension. Um, so I think for me, serving the community, whether it's a planting, whether it's a integration with another church, within whether it's a campus, each each model has a challenge. And then how do we embrace that?
You had talked about the differentiation, like you had talked about planting a Spanish-speaking church. And some of our conversations in Florida, you were talking about this idea of integration and how even talk about your kids. You were saying like my kids.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, what does the integration mean? Both ways, not just one way. So yeah,
Yeah,
talk
I
about that.
I think I think integration. And this is something that we talk here on Mosaic a lot. And so let me make this like proximity is not unity. Like we can be sitting down at the same table, and not necessarily we're united. We can be in disagreement. We probably don't like each other, but we're sitting at the same table. So when some churches say, "Oh, I want integration," meaning I want all the Hispanics and all this community to be part of the Anglo, uh, I don't think that's integration. I think integration is unite us. What unites us is the values, uh, the what we believe, core beliefs, the mission, the vision. If we're united in all those fronts, then I'll see it like I'm a pastor of the Hispanic community, and my flock is walking alongside the Anglo community towards the same goal. It's not that I'm taking my flock to a different place to pastor, to eat here, and then I come back. So to be able to do that, you need to understand certain things. First of all, is first generation, second generation, third generation. My kids were they're adopted. They were born here. But if you ask my kids, they'll tell you, "Oh, I'm Puerto Rican." They'll tell you I'm Puerto Rican, and because they learn my culture, they learn let's go to Puerto Rico and eating the Puerto Rican food. But my kids don't speak Spanish. Like like I mean the oldest one understands Spanish, but my younger Marcos, which is 8, I talk to him and he looks at me like, "Papa, what are you saying?" And I'm like, "You gotta learn Spanish, man. Like you gotta get with the program here." So when I come to church, integration means that there's gotta be a space where even though he's Puerto Rican or he feels Puerto Rican, he has a space where the message, where he can go in, and then I send him to kids, because that's what he knows. If I go into a church and I create a kids ministry in Spanish and I send my kid there, he's coming out the first day. "Papa, I don't want to go there. Papa, I don't want to do this." So we need to understand the need of each generation. And I think what the Hispanic leadership, in cases, I'm not saying all of them, in cases, is that we want to keep the same model of it has to be Hispanic, it has to be Hispanic, it has to be Hispanic. Well, maybe not. Maybe we need to find a way that we can both find the needs of the first generation, which you will always have. You always have people coming in, learning the culture, and then those who are learning, they will move within the Anglo community.
That's great. And one of the questions I also had for you was around the when you're talking about integration, what can the Anglo Church be learning from the Hispanic cultures that are intersecting with it?
Yes. I thought about that question since I got the email. And let me use Romans for that. And I want to be very careful here. But when we read Romans, we find Paul writing to the Jews and to the Gentiles. And the Jews are looking down to the Gentiles like, "Oh, you're not from the lineage of Abraham. Oh, you're not part of this." And what Paul is saying is, the Gentiles have been grafted. They have been grafted. Like to me, the Hispanic community in the States is a God thing. Like for me, the Hispanics have been grafted in the States. So when I look at what God is doing, perhaps, and that includes myself, because I again, the U.S. citizen, and I've been here for a long time. What does it mean that God have grafted Hispanics? So now we're all the same. So now we need to look at the Gentiles, right? Like Jews look at the Gentiles and say, "Man, these people are brought in by God." And now, how do I make this, or close the separation? And it's interesting because I usually tell people, how do the Gentiles look at the Jews? Were they afraid of them? Like they look like nobody's gonna accept us here. Like I believe in Jesus because I don't behave like you now, or I don't know your sacrifices, or I don't understand what you're doing. It's a cultural thing. To me, there's a cultural aspect of this Romans conversation. And I think that we need to be very careful in the way we approach the Hispanics, that they don't feel like because they're not from here, they're not part of what God is doing. And I think that, you know, in the same Romans, if you read Romans 1 through 11, man, I read that thing and I got a pen and I start circling stuff because there's a part where God tells the Jews, because of you, the Gentiles are sinning. Because the Gentile wanted to be like them. Isn't that what every immigrant comes here and they want to be like the Anglos? Because what you have is the dream, the promised land, right? So I come here and I look at the Anglo and I say, that's what I want to be. And we need to be very careful as a church that we portray the wrong message. We don't want to be like the Anglo. We don't want to be like we want to be like God. We want to be like Jesus. So if that's our aim, I think that and listen, I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that the Anglo Church are the Jews. What I'm trying to say is illustrating maybe a collision of two cultures that are not understanding each other, where the Jews are saying, why are you saying that you're a believer? Well, we believe in Jesus, right? And the Jews are like, oh no, but you don't do none of that stuff. So it's a collision. It's not understanding. So I think it's just a matter of sitting down and understanding. The learning curve is not only for the immigrants or for the Hispanics or for the Brazilians. The learning curve is also for the Anglo. The Anglo needs to learn, what is it that I'm dealing with? What is it that God has brought in here? So I think there's an extension there. There's something that we need to do. And hey, that's the tension, and that's what we're trying to do.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Eduardo. I think that's really helpful. And honestly, I just appreciate the call to all of us to remember we all have learning to do and listening to do and awareness to build and to grow. I'm curious, like as you, you talked about just the shifting dynamic of Orlando itself. I think in many contexts, dynamics and demographics have shifted and will continue to shift over coming years. Like we don't even know what will happen in terms of the American church and the demographics of the American church and things like that. What would you say? You're talking a lot about this idea of integration, which I think is really important, and the need for both sides of this conversation to come together and to listen to one another. But I'm curious, as you look to the future, what do you want the American church to understand about the years ahead, about how we're going to reach, the Hispanic demographic and things like that? What would you want our listeners to know or to be aware of as you think about the future?
Well, I think, when we talked about missions and we think that we have to go outside the States to do missions, I think in the last 10, 15 years, mission is local. God is bringing people from every nation, from every tongue, from every place. God is bringing them here. So now it becomes a local mission. And I think that the leadership, we need to sit down and we need to say, what is our reality? What is it what's going to look like? Because definitely I would think that the Hispanic population will grow. And if it keeps growing at the rate that it's growing, we need a responsibility. So what I would say is, let's make space to sit down. Let's first realize that we have a real local mission responsibility right outside our doors. I mean, we're not talking about getting a plane and going to another state, or we're not even talking about going 2 hours away. We're talking about in the next block. We're talking about in the next block. What is it that we're going to do as a church to create space where these people can come and meet Jesus? I think That's what we need to do. We need to sit down. We need to realize, and then we need to discuss what would it take. Um, does it take resources? Yes, it will take resources. Does it take time? Yes, it's going to take time. Is it hard work? Yes, it's hard work. It's going to be a lot of hard work. I mean, we're talking about creating, and I think this is the word. I don't just forgive my English here, but I don't know if it's acculturation or acculturation. I think it's acculturation. Acculturation is where you take an adult and you teach him a culture. Enculturation is what you do with kids. Your kids were born in your house, they learn because they're there. But acculturation is when you take an adult and you make him a participant in the society by teaching him the culture that you want him to be part of. And now this person becomes a bicultural person, which I'm considering myself a bicultural, meaning that I can go to the Hispanic side and I can sit down and I can identify with them, eat the same thing, but at the same time, I can move away from that and go to the Anglo culture and I can sit down and I can behave like that. But that's a learning experience. That's something that you need to learn. So how do we create spaces for them to learn that, right? And then we need to take in consideration that most of the people that come here, I do ESL. I offer ESL classes here, English as a second language for people to learn. And most of the people come here scared. So we need to understand that it's not that they're scared of us like if we're a ghost or a monster, but they're scared because they know they're in a disadvantage. And if we don't create spaces where they can come in and feel respected, seen, like, hey man, you're part of us. Just come in and we'll teach you. Don't worry about it. If we don't create those spaces, I don't know if we're doing what we're supposed to do.
Eduardo, it's great. I love what you were saying about missions, and missions really is moving to here. We actually teach in the Intentional Churches model, the Acts 1:8 model, that it actually starts with personal ownership of the Great Commission of every believer. And then our ripples of impact eventually can get to the uttermost parts of the world. But if we're not living out mission where we live, work, and play, and in our what we call relational reach zone, then we're missing part of the full, deep, and abundant life that Jesus promises. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts around when you think about people who don't know Jesus, who are either first generation or second generation in Central Florida. What does relational evangelism look like for both the believer and those who don't yet know Jesus? Like, how does that work? And is it that much different than kind of the Anglo expression of relational evangelism? Yeah, talk about that for a few.
Well, I think there's not much different because in both cultures, relationships are important. Like relationship, it's important. Now, what I think the distinction is, in the Hispanic community, to talk about the Brazilian, because I'm the pastor here for them too, and I've seen for them, relationship comes before structure, before building, before a program. Like, if we have a great program, if we have a beautiful service with all the lights and we have all the music, at the end of the service, we just want to hang out. We just don't want to get out of the door. Like to us, relationships, family trumps everything else. And again, I'm not saying that the for Anglo is not the same. What I'm saying is there's a nuance there that when you sit down at a table and you start eating together and we hug each other, we kiss each other. I was telling somebody the other day, man, I miss hugging people. Like there's somebody hugging here. Like I want to hug everybody. I want, we kiss everybody. We like, let's go, and And I'm not saying that the Anglo needs to do that. I think that we need to be understood. We need to know, well, these people are like that. That's what they need in the ministry. Like, like, we do worship, and again, I'm not. You just worship everybody with hands down. I mean, we want to clap. And I'm not talking about being, a different denomination. We're talking about there is something in the Hispanic that we like music. It's just within us. So I think we need to create those spaces for that to happen. And obviously it might look different, but it looks different for those that do not understand. But for those that understand, it's normal. So I think there's got to be a space for that.
No, I love it. And back to one of our earlier questions about like that, I think listening to you and Pastor Israel and a few other friends in Central Florida, that's something the Anglo Church can learn, the relationship side, the strength of the relationship. And just kind of going with the same thought, how do you see that play out then in relational evangelism? When outside of the church,
Yeah. Well,
know.
I think it's a. Let me give you this, because I think it's outside the church. We need to relate to people, and people understands culture before they can understand whatever message you're gonna say. And here's what I mean by that. I was on a cruise last week on spring break, and I went 2 nights to the Latin night of the cruise. And there's this group playing Hispanic music, man, from every country, Hispanic country, every famous singer. They were killing it. And I come and I say, hey, man, you guys are great. And I was singing out of my lungs the songs they were singing, songs from artists that probably died years ago. But the Hispanics will know these songs. So they came down from the stage and they said, hey, man, nice to meet you. So I talked to them. One of them sit down with me at the table, and we started talking. We're from Colombia, and we are all, graduates from music. And we started talking, and there's something that unites us. And this is outside the church. This isn't a cruise. And then I have the opportunity to go and say, well, guys, I'm a pastor, but I love your music. And they were like, what? And all their songs. And I'm like, of course, man, I love the Hispanic culture. I grew up in this culture. I understand it. And I love what you guys are doing. And then I said, I want you guys to know that what you guys have is a gift from God. That what you're doing is because God has given you a gift. And I want you to never forget what you have. And we need to share that with everybody. So imagine if I would have gone there and sit down with my face like, oh, they're singing, these songs from this artist, and I'm a pastor and I cannot relate. That conversation would never happen. Mm-hmm. So when we come out of the church, out of the walls of the church, we need to understand what people are going through. And if whatever they're doing, that doesn't mean that they cannot be brought into. Actually, I think that we need to bring the wall down. Hey, if you smoke cigar, I mean, I don't smoke cigars, but let's do some cigar, like whatever, like if you want to drink a beer, hey man, I'll sit down with you, because I think relationships brings down the wall. And I think that relationship in the Hispanics, we need to understand that.
I would say, Erin, I'd love your thoughts here too. I'd say that's true of Anglos as well. We just have lost the art of being curious and question asking about people's stories. Because that's when I feel like I'm the most effective in relational evangelism, planting and watering. It's when I've gotten somebody's story out of them before they ever know I'm a pastor or anything else, So I just really appreciating, Eduardo, you're emphasizing something that I'm learning is innate in a lot of Hispanic cultures. And in the Anglo culture, we're almost the opposite. We become so independent, so isolated, so that, and I'm probably one that would be standing there with my arms crossed while the Latin music was flying at me. Erin, do you have thoughts around this?
No, yeah, I just think we have a lot to learn. I at Canyon Ridge, we right now have another church just using our space on Sunday afternoons, a Hispanic church, and they're literally just using one of our buildings, and they do a bilingual service. And part of that is they're trying to meet both first and second generation in the church service that they host in one service so that families can be all together. And, I'm just telling you what, when we went and met with this team, the whole team, the pastor has been here for 5 years from Mexico. Whole team is Hispanic and bilingual. And I mean, we had the best time. The vibe was totally different than, we will do tours for other churches and things. And this Hispanic church came in and I was like, man, I want to hang out with these people. And so we've had different staff members serving with their church on Sunday afternoons. And it's just interesting that our staff who, they're all in a mega church context in Las Vegas, and they're getting a taste of this Hispanic church community. And every single one of them is like, man, something different is happening there. And I think the thing that they're pointing to when I dig is this relational piece, that relationship really does come before any program, any sermon, any music, anything. It just comes first, and people are experiencing that firsthand. So it's just, this conversation is fun for me because I feel like we're kind of experiencing this and learning so much right now in our own backyard about this. And just my limited experience, I was like, man, one of our staff members was like, I think I'm going to quit and go work for those guys. they're having the best time over there.
I know. I used to be part of the worship team. I don't know if I can say it, Doug, but I was a First Baptist. So I come from First Baptist. I served with them for 11 years. And I used to do worship in the Hispanic. And we had some musicians from the Anglo Church to come. And they were like, man, I want to play here every Sunday. Like right. they were enjoying just playing with us because of the difference, in and we're worshiping God. I mean, it's just, and I cannot explain it because I'm part of it, but I don't know what they were feeling, but they were like, man, we want to play with you guys every Sunday. So I think there's something, imagine if we can all explore that in different areas too.
Yeah, that's what I would just add is I just so appreciate your thoughts, Eduardo, around integration, because it would be so easy for us to just say to them, this is how you're going to do it because you're using our campus. And for us to learn more and more, to meet them in their expression of church and their expression of faith, and has been a good learning for us. So I just appreciate so many of the thoughts that you've shared.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. I have one more just question as we kind of wrap up our time. And that is, for our listeners, many of which are from varied backgrounds, varied demographics, of church leadership and things, what would be one piece of really practical advice you would give to all of us just around this conversation? If we're all going to get better at reaching the Hispanic communities around us, around integrating with the Hispanic communities around us, what's one piece of advice that you would give us to just get better and to continue to grow in that way?
Sure. Well, I will say I'll say two things, but the second one is part of the first one, which is everything starts with the leadership. If the lead pastor works together with the Hispanic pastor or whichever the community is, there has to be trust. That's the second thing. So we need to work together. We need to, because people follow. And we know this. People follow leadership. If your community sees you alongside with a Hispanic pastor, that means that your community is going to be alongside the Hispanic community because everybody's following. So everything starts with leadership. And the second thing I mentioned is trust. it is important that, and I'll say this about the Hispanic pastors or, whichever other community, we need to understand what we are being asked to do within the Anglo Church. Once you understand what is the mission, what is the values, what is it that we believe, what is it that the church is going, it is my responsibility to work alongside with the lead pastor and just move forward. But I need to understand what the church believes. And on the same token, now the lead pastor needs to trust that I will follow that. And I will not deviate. I will not take a left turn. So I think that leadership needs to sit down and say, okay, here's where we're going. This is what and now what do you think? And then I'll say, okay, so I think the way to do this, it's this way. And then we move together. And obviously we're going to learn, we're going to change, we're going to adjust, we're going to change. But I think leadership, the Hispanic community is not just the responsibility of the Hispanic pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I am a pastor of the Hispanics, but I'm also a pastor at Mosaic Church. And we do a very good job here at Mosaic to understand that Eduardo is not just the pastor of the Hispanic, but he's a pastor within Mosaic. And I have to make sure that I go to my people and I say, hey, our pastor, Renault, and I go and say, he's our pastor. So you need to have those kind of understanding and trust so all ministries can walk alongside. So what I would say to the leadership is sit down and trust. And obviously, God is in the equation. We cannot take God out of this equation.
That's awesome. Eduardo, thank you so much for just sharing your heart and for helping all of us really grow in our understanding and hopefully practice of this. And to our listeners, thanks so much for listening to the Intentional Churches podcast. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This just really helps us tremendously as we grow and try to reach more and more leaders. And remember, you can download the free Radical Alignment ebook at intentionalchurches.com/alignment. We'll see you next time.